Hello guys. So today evening on May 28th, I received an alert on my mobile phone saying that HYBE stock has plummeted in the after hours markets. So my heart sank. I was wondering if something happened to any of the artists, especially BTS members. So I checked, and then I saw that the stock price plummeted by like more than 10% at one point, and it recovered to some degree. A few minutes later. So I looked into the case and saw that 한국경제, Korean economy, or 한경, came up with this exclusive article targeting Bang Si-hyuk, the chairman of HYBE. Now, mind you, 한국경제 has reported on a similar issue last year on November 29th, to be specific, talking about how Bang Si-hyuk made 400 billion won from HYBE's IPO. And then it became this, hot potato at the time. And for a few months, it kind of died down, but then out of nowhere, they came up with this article. Exclusive headline. All right, so let me read this for you, and then I will talk about a few other things, and also provide you some context from last year. Okay, and I made this video last year about it. Deep dive into Bang Si-hyuk's secret deal during a HYBE IPO. So if you're interested, go check that out. All right, so let's start here. Exclusive. Prosecutors target Bang Si-hyuk, HYBE's IPO under scrutiny for potential fraud. That's the title, written by journalists Choi Seok-chul and Cha Jun-ho, who wrote last year's article as well. Interestingly, one of the three journalists, Cho Jin-hyung, is not included for this article. And then last year, back in November, they made that, they put the news on the front page the next day. And I'm pretty sure this is going to happen the same way tomorrow, because it says A1, meaning it will be featured on the front page of the newspapers, like paper. Okay? All right, so here we go. South Korea's Financial Supervisory Service, FSS, is reportedly preparing to refer HYBE founder and chairman Bang Si-hyuk to prosecutors on suspicion of engaging in fraudulent and unfair trading during the company's IPO process. According to industry sources on May 28th, notice that it says according to industry sources, not according to FSS, Financial Supervisory Service. The FSS Second Investigation Bureau has obtained evidence that Bang misled existing shareholders in 2019 by claiming HYBE had no plans to go public. This misinformation allegedly prompted investors to sell their stakes to a private equity fund, PF, founded by an associate of Bang. At the same time, HYBE was actively pursuing its IPO, including filing for a designated auditor, a required step in the IPO process. Bang reportedly had an agreement with this PF to receive 30% of the investment gains, and is estimated to have collected approximately 400 billion won. This profit-sharing contract was not disclosed in HYBE's IPO filings. Now, with this paragraph, the latter half is something we already know from last year. And then there were some articles that were written to provide more context about how, even though this could be, sort of like a gray zone area thingy, it's not necessarily illegal. Now, the first half of this paragraph is what this whole article is about, right? Essentially saying that what HYBE said to the original investors and what HYBE actually did was different. Okay, so let's keep reading. The FSS has concluded that this series of events constitutes fraudulent and unfair trading under the Capital Markets Act. That is, according to the industry sources. Okay. The agency plans to complete its investigation soon and refer the case to prosecutors under a fast-track procedure. The Financial Crime Investigation Unit of the Seoul Metropolitan Police is also conducting a parallel investigation. which is why they included 검찰, prosecutors in this title to make it more noticeable. A HYBE spokesperson commented, all transactions were reviewed by legal counsel and carried out within legal boundaries. All right, so let's see. The controversy centers on what happened in late 2019. The FSS has secured evidence indicating that HYBE and Bang were simultaneously assuring investors that there was no IPO plans while actively preparing for the IPO behind the scenes. Bang Si-hyuk had signed sequential shareholder agreements with firms like Stick Investments, Eastone Equity Partners, and New Main Equity prior to HYBE's listing in October 2020, when the company was still known as Big Hit Entertainment. Under these agreements, Bang Si-hyuk would receive 30% of any profits from PEF share sales after the IPO, and if the IPO failed, he personally agreed to buy back the shares. These PEFs had acquired large stakes in HYBE during 2018 and 2019. Stick Investments paid 103.9 billion Korean won to acquire a 12.4% stake from LB Investments and other VCs. In the second half of 2019, Eastone PE and New Main Equity, both newly established by Bang's associate, bought 11.4% of HYBE from prior shareholders including Alpen Route Asset Management and former executive Choi Yu-jung for about 130 billion Korean won. The key period under scrutiny is late 2019, when existing investors such as Legend Capital reportedly sent official emails urging HYBE to begin IPO preparations. In response, HYBE's management, including the CEO, convened an internal committee and responded that an IPO was not feasible given the company's valuation at the time. Okay, so that's the key point of this article. Market insiders believe that this response influenced existing investors to sell their stakes unknowingly to PEFs affiliated with Bang, unaware that HYBE had already filed for designated auditor status in September 2019, a formal step that signals IPO intent. Filing for a designated auditor requires documentation providing IPO intent, such as board meeting minutes and lead underwriter contracts. In other words, HYBE was telling investors no IPO while telling regulators we are going public. If prosecutors determine that the transactions between Bang and the PEFs constitute a legal violation, serious consequences may follow. Article 443 of Korea's Capital Markets Act states that if a party gains or avoids losses of over 5 billion Korean won through fraudulent acts, they may face life imprisonment or at least 5 years in prison. The Financial Crimes Unit of the Seoul Police is conducting a separate but parallel investigation and is said to have made substantial progress. Regulators are also reportedly considering the broader market implications. If undisclosed private contracts between major shareholders and PEFs are allowed to continue unchecked, it could undermine confidence in Korea's public offering system. One financial industry insider commented, the HYBE case is a textbook example of covert private deals and personal gain during an IPO. If the government doesn't draw a firm line here, similar cases could become common. Okay? So, again, the key point, a lot of what was written in this article is pretty similar to the article written last year, but the thing is, according to the industry insiders, where was it? HYBE said to the original investors that they are not ready for IPO. Convened an internal committee and responded that an IPO was not feasible given the company's valuation at the time. But then such response influenced existing investors to sell their stakes. Unknowingly to PFs affiliated with Bang, unaware that HYBE had already filed for designated auditor status in September 2019. So I guess, from the perspectives of these original investors, they might feel mad and maybe felt like they were, being stabbed in the back by HYBE, because after they sold the shares, guess what happened? HYBE IPO, right? But yeah, that's essentially the gist of this article. Now, interestingly, two things. First of all, almost right after this article was released by 한국경제, Korean Economy, this particular Korean media called TV Report released this article, saying basically the same thing, but the title goes something like, Bang Si-hyuk faces fraud allegations over HYBE IPO deal, could face life imprisonment. So very provocative, classic yellow journalism. And then, to make it even worse, they use these photos. Well, a photo of Bang Si-hyuk, that's understandable. But a photo of Chaewon from Le Sserafim out of nowhere? I didn't get it. And mind you, TV Report is a media company under Fast View, see right here, which is a company that, HYBE sued, and then police has recently referred to prosecutors for the case where Fast View allegedly did organize smear campaigns against HYBE artists, right? So something is kind of sketchy and fishy right here. In terms of the actual content of the article, it's pretty similar. Bang Si-hyuk is under scrutiny over allegations of fraudulent trading. According to the report, the FSS Second Investigation Bureau has obtained evidence that in 2019, Bang allegedly misled existing investors by stating that HYBE had no plans to go public. Based on the statement, those investors sold their shares to a private equity fund founded by Bang's close associates, but during the same period, HYBE had already begun the IPO process, including filing for a designated auditor, which is a required step for going public. The FSS has concluded that these actions may constitute fraudulent and unfair trading. And of course, I don't think they have, directly contacted the FSS. But then it says that if Bang is found to have violated the law, he could face serious legal consequences, blah, 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 blah. Offenders may face life imprisonment or a minimum sentence of 5 years. Okay? And then at the end of the article, it says the FSS is expected to respond firmly, citing the broader implications for capital market integrity. Now, one more point. Later on, 중앙일보, which is one of major Korean media agencies, reported on the issue about 2 hours after 한국경제 made a report. And then at the end of the article, it says this. Above it, it's pretty much the same. HYBE maintains that all transactions were carried out within legal boundaries after thorough legal review. Meanwhile, an official from the Financial Supervisory Service, FSS, speaking on the condition of anonymity, said no decision has been made yet regarding a referral to prosecutors. So there's a clear difference in terms of tone between these two articles. Well, first of all, I don't think based on the text, 한국경제 actually contacted the FSS. At least it's not being mentioned in this article. But it seems like 중앙일보 actually contacted the institution, FSS, and one of the insiders said that no decision has been made yet regarding a referral to prosecutors, while 한국경제 made it seem like they are about to refer the case to prosecutors. So we'll have to see who is right. But the difference is 한국경제 is crediting, insiders, industry insiders, like 업계 관계자 or 투자은행 업계. So investment bank industry, according to investment bank industry. While 중앙일보 actually, contradict the FSS. All right, what else? Now, after Korea economy, 한국경제, came up with this first article last year, the exclusive article back on November 29th. HYBE made this official statement saying, we provided the shareholder agreement to our RPO underwriters during the listing preparation process. The underwriters reviewed the agreement in accordance with applicable laws, and we believe there were no violations of relevant regulations during the IPO process. Okay, and other articles have mentioned that HYBE has worked with multiple law firms to make sure that the IPO process has no issues or problems. Okay, and then December 2nd, 한국경제 came up with this article. Okay, the Korea Exchange, the stock exchange, Korea Exchange has acknowledged flaws in its IPO review process related to HYBE's undisclosed shareholder agreement, but said it will not impose any penalties on the company. Instead, it plans to strengthen its documentation and review procedures going forward. While HYBE had omitted a key agreement from its IPO filings, specifically a profit-sharing deal between Chairman Bang Si-hyuk and a private equity fund, the exchange concluded that this does not warrant a formal delisting review. A spokesperson admitted the contract should have been disclosed, but said the omission did not clearly violate listing rules, largely because the exchange failed to request the disclosure during the review process. The current due diligence checklist requires disclosure of shareholder agreements in the case of new share investments, but this case involved existing shares, secondary stock, making the rule somewhat ambiguous. As a result, the exchange said it would revise and clarify its guidelines to prevent similar issues in the future. So what does it mean? According to the Korea Exchange, even though this whole case was in a gray area, it's not necessarily illegal, although it will be better if it never happens again in the future in the Korean market. Okay. Also, there were other Korean media agencies who provided more context at the time. For example, this article said that there has been controversy over whether HYBE chairman Bang Si-hyuk secretly pocketed 400 Korean won, but some in the financial industry argue it wasn't a hidden scheme, but rather a calculated decision where Bang Si-hyuk took on personal financial risk to support early investors. Why are they providing such context? Because at the time, a lot of haters or those called experts tried to frame it in a way that Bang Si-hyuk is this super a guy who just wants to pocket all the money for himself. So this article is trying to provide more context about that. The word I was looking for was greedy, like super greedy guy. According to investment banking sources, Bang entered into agreements in 2018 and 2019 with private equity firms like Stick Investment, Eastern Equity Partners, and New Main Equity. The deal guaranteed Bang 30% of the profits if those firms made significant returns from HYBE's IPO. When HYBE went public in October 2020, the PFs made major profits, and Bang Si-hyuk reportedly received around 400 billion Korean won. And this article said that he paid half of it as taxes to the government. Well, yeah, that's what happened. Critics pointed out that this arrangement wasn't disclosed in the IPO filings, but HYBE and its underwriters reviewed the contract and determined that disclosure wasn't legally required. So they worked with NH Investment and Securities and 4 top law firms. Instead, they provided detailed information about lockup periods and price risk to the public. HYBE maintains that the purpose of the agreement wasn't to enrich Pang, but to help early investors exit. Bang Si-hyuk personally agreed to honor their put options, guaranteeing to buy back shares if needed, something the company couldn't take on without risk. He also proposed the earn-out clause that allowed him to share in upside profits if the IPO succeeded. Had the IPO failed, he could have suffered huge personal losses. So Bang Si-hyuk personally, took on the risk because the company couldn't take on, what was it? The put options without risk. Okay. Importantly, the agreement was between private parties and didn't harm public shareholders, since the rise in HYBE stock price also benefited them. Moreover, Bang Si-hyuk used a large portion of the earnings from that deal to fully subscribe to HYBE's 2021 rights offering, injecting 154.8 billion Korean won back into the company. One insider in the entertainment industry noted, this deal went through thorough legal review. It's hard to call it a problem just because it turned out profitable. Okay. And another article. This one was more systematic in terms of the composition of the article, but let me quickly summarize. So, it asked 5 key questions whether this deal, private deal, was legal or problematic. Okay? This article breaks down the controversy into 5 main issues. First of all, why did Bang Si-hyuk receive 400 billion Korean won personally? Instead of selling his own shares during the IPO, Bang Si-hyuk arranged to receive 30% of profits earned by PEFs if the IPO was successful. In return, he personally agreed to cover potential losses through put options if the IPO failed. This give-and-take agreement was seen as Bang Si-hyuk taking on significant personal risk to support early investors. 2. Was the deal linked to new shares or old shares? Legal experts say it matters whether the PES bought new shares or old shares, so primary shares or secondary shares. If Bang Si-hyuk has shared profits from newly issued stock, it might raise concerns about breach of fiduciary duty, but in this case, the PES bought existing shares from earlier investors, not from the company itself, making it a private transaction outside HYBE's balance sheet. Question number 3. Was a put option inherited from previous investors? Some questioned whether Bang Si-hyuk's put option commitment was newly added or inherited. It turns out the PFs added the put option as part of their own new agreements with Bang Si-hyuk. In return, Bang Si-hyuk secured a 30% profit sharing clause. So this voluntary setup is why legal experts believe it doesn't amount to fraud or misrepresentation. Question number 4. Should the deal have been disclosed in the IPO filing? Now, this remains a gray area according to this article. Technically, HYBE wasn't required to disclose private shareholder contracts made before going public. Korean law mainly requires disclosure of deals that affect control or involve special parties. Since Bang Si-hyuk's deal didn't affect HYBE's governance, it wasn't seen as mandatory to disclose, though opinions vary. Now, last question. Were the PEFs considered related parties? Disclosure rules are stricter when the deal involves special related parties. Whether the PEFs met that definition is debatable. Some legal experts say if Bang Si-hyuk and the PEFs had voting agreements or influence over each other, disclosure might have been required. But according to HYBE's own filings, the PEFs weren't listed as Bang Si-hyuk's related parties. Only companies like Netmarble and BTS members were. The bottom line is, the deal may look questionable from the outside, but legal experts point out that it was structured carefully, reviewed by major law firms, and occurred between private parties. Since no public shareholders were harmed and the agreements involved significant risk on Bang Si-hyuk's part, it may be legally defensible, even if it now raises, eyebrows in hindsight. Okay, so that was from the end of last year. And when the news first broke out by Hangyeong, the stock price kind of got affected, but only for a while. It recovered in a few weeks, but then it started to rise again. So we'll have to see whether this particular exclusive article by 한국경제 will affect the stock price in the near future, especially tomorrow. And I guess the key question that I have, well, I have a series of questions. First of all, who has shared this particular email or the response that HYBE sent to the original investors? Probably the original investors themselves, who are, what was it? Legend Capital? Okay, Legend Capital. That's the name of the existing or the original investors, who have prompted HYBE to get ready for IPO. But then, according to this article, HYBE told them that IPO is not possible at the moment due to valuation. So I guess maybe the related personnel under or related to this specific investor institution, Legend Capital, might have held resentment against HYBE and Bang Si-hyuk and share such information with 한국경제. Who knows? Another question that I have is timing. Why did 한국경제 release this article today on May 28th when the majority of Korean people are thinking about the election? That's the major topic in Korea. In fact, voting is starting to happen tomorrow, early voting tomorrow and Thursday, Friday. And then the official voting happens on June 3rd. So if you have an exclusive article to release, maybe you should release it after the election when people have something else to worry about. I don't know. Who knows? So I don't know. I thought it was interesting. And also, it might be likely that 한국경제 will continue to release related articles because right now, the FSS, according to them, has not taken any action, is thinking about or preparing to refer the case to prosecutors, although 중앙일보 says that nothing has been decided yet. So, will they continue to release articles and affect HYBE stock price? We'll have to see. Another question, it's not the question of how, but why did TV report include this very provocative headline and Chaewon's picture, and then release this article right after 한국경제? Maybe they're seriously holding grudge against HYBE because of this whole fast view case. I don't know. We'll have to see. What else? The timing wise, yesterday or today. First of all, it was yesterday when HYBE disclosed that they're making a deal with Tencent Entertainment, where they're selling the entire stakes in SM to Tencent, right? And also yesterday and today, there was whole controversy around aespa Karina, SM Entertainment's most popular artist right now, who's involved with this whole political controversy, right? So I don't know. Maybe this is, an attempt to divert people's attention away from that case to Bang Si-hyuk. Who knows? I mean, if you have been my subscriber, you know that I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, right? In fact, I'm very cautious about talking about conspiracy theories. But when it comes to Korean stock market, it sometimes gets really sketchy and fishy. Of course, U.S. stock market has similar things, but in Korea, there's a whole, called Sihyuk, those people who are trying to drive a specific company's stock price either up or down through various means. And one of the most effective means is, of course, Korean media, right? There are whole stories about how those Sihyuk, those parties, pay journalists or media agencies to write articles on their behalf to affect a specific company's stock price. So I don't know. Maybe there are some short sellers who want the stock price to fall, or maybe there are some institutional investors who want to get in before BTS comes back. Or maybe those people did not get a chance to invest in the company, whereas the stock price has risen too quickly for them. Who knows? So those are questions that I have. But for now, in terms of how this particular case goes, we'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see whether the FSS really trying to refer the case to prosecutors and what kinds of decision the relevant agencies will make if the case is being referred to prosecutors. What else? Yeah, if you have any information to add, or if there's any mistake that I made in this video, please feel free to share and correct me. And then last two things that I want to mention. First of all, thank God that nothing really happened to HYBE artists, because my heart really sank when I saw the alert. I was like, oh, is something happening to BTS members or something? And then secondly, one of the reasons why I respect and admire Bang Si-hyuk is because he is one of the most hated persons in the K-pop industry, entertainment industry, and for various reasons. Go ask haters for why they hate the guy, but he's not the type of guy who lets out his emotions through social media. He just stays super low-key and quiet and does what he loves to do, what he has to do for the music industry, for his artists, and for the company. So, I just want to wish him luck. We'll have to see what will ultimately happen. And then it's truly interesting times, both in terms of K-pop industry, and politically, things are quite nosy in Korea, and what's going to happen to the whole, the called lifting of Chinese ban on K-pop, and the relationship between HYBE and SM and Tencent, and HYBE and other relevant parties. We'll have to see. Okay? So, there you go. I hope this was informative, and I'll see you guys later. As always, let's stay positive, respectful, and classy when we write comments. All right? Peace, love. Bye-bye.